There you have it. Former President Donald Trump has just wrapped his address at the Republican National Convention. Fun fact, that is the longest televised acceptance speech in U.S. history, clocking in at about an hour and 30 minutes. So definitely records breaking for Donald Trump during this unprecedented election cycle. Welcome to America's Vote 2024 post-show coverage. I'm Julia Manchester. We'll kick things off with Director of Data Science for Decision Desk HQ, Scott Tranter. Scott, thanks so much for joining us and staying up late with us tonight. Let's get right into it. What were your takeaways? Did Trump hit the right notes this convention speech?
Yeah, well, it was fact it was the longest. We'll have to get some polling whether it was fun. 30 minutes. Look, empathy. That's the only word I can describe. Believable empathy from former President Trump. That is a different look from him, and it's gonna resonate with voters. Obviously, you saw it in the crowd. The last half hour, 45 minutes of it was the normal red meat, which is what has made him famous and what is going to resonate with some of these red meat voters that he needs to turn on these swing states. But by and large, look, this was a well-run convention, and this was a speech that was a little bit different for Donald Trump, and people are going to take notice.
Scott, one thing that was interesting to me is that this night had, a number of divisive figures, in the lineup, very, some bombastic figures. I mean, you had Hulk Hogan at one point, and then he was followed by Franklin Graham. And then, of course, you had, Mike Pompeo, Tucker Carlson, an interesting cast of characters. But we know that going into tonight, the theme was supposed to be unity, and how Trump was, touched on unifying America. In fact, he said, "I'll be president for all Americans." Scott, do you think you can see him continue to lean into this messaging going forward, or is this something he's just doing for the time being?
Look, we've seen this in speeches before from him. Remember back in his first term, it's like, is this the night Donald Trump became president, or is this the night he became presidential? If he's able to keep this tone, this is the unifying tone he's looking for. This will be a different look for him. This is what has traditionally won, presidents like Bill Clinton, king of empathy, George W. Bush, compassionate conservatism. Whether he'll be able to keep with it, I'm not sure. He says he will. Look, we are less than a week away from his assassination attempt. That certainly can change anyone and possibly him. But, unity is what it was, and that's what that building felt like, and that's what this broadcast felt like.
The juxtaposition and the comparison between tonight's Republican convention, or I should say this week's Republican National Convention, with Democrats could not be any more stark. You have this very, arguably a well-run Republican Republican convention. You have a very unified Republican front in Milwaukee. Former President Trump's primary rivals coming out to endorse him and give their full-throated support. But then from Democrats, you're continuing to see this drip, maybe, a potential dam breaking of major, Democratic figureheads like Adam Schiff, for example, congressman from California, potentially Nancy Pelosi, Barack Obama, voicing these concerns about Joe Biden. Schiff, of course, calling on Joe Biden to step down from the ticket. In terms of this comparison, do you think we're going to see a reaction from voters in the polls?
Yeah, look, I mean, this might be one of the few times we can accurately say Democrats in disarray, as you pointed out. The drip of, people calling for Joe Biden to step aside, both on the record and off the record. Look, voters are looking for someone they can get excited for. That's what all the polling shows. Democrat, Republican, Independent. They're not super happy with who the Democrats have put up and who the Republicans have put up. But Donald Trump is putting forth a message that they can wrap around, voters can wrap their heads around. The Democrats are still trying to figure out what their message is. And the juxtaposition couldn't be any worse. You have Joe Biden coming off the campaign trail, sick with COVID, closing the lid earlier in the week. It's one of those things where, look, they couldn't have planned it any better. And I don't think, the Democrats are going to wake up tomorrow with an answer. They've still got a little bit more organizing, a little more things to figure out before their convention.
You brought up the assassination attempt against former President Trump. That was obviously a big part of it. Less than a week ago. And he's, now just wrapped on that stage, accepting the Republican nomination for president. We've seen some polling come out post-shooting. I'm not sure, when that polling was necessarily conducted. I don't have it in front of me, but do you think the assassination will, or assassination attempt, will ultimately have an impact on, how he is viewed from voters? I talked to one strategist today who said this could just essentially be a temporary thing. It won't be long-standing.
Well, a little math late at night. Look, state level polls this far out from the election generally aren't predictive. But if the election were held today, I would say, look, this is a unifying moment for Republicans. And that was the question throughout the primary for Donald Trump, as he was, still giving up 10 to 15% of the Republican vote, even when he had no serious opposition. I don't know that he has to worry about that 10 to 15% of Republican vote that was a little bit wary of him, which allows him to focus on those independent swing voters and maybe taking a few of the Democrat working class voters with him.
So Ohio Senator J.D. Vance officially introduced himself to a national audience last night. Us in the political world knew him, prior to him running for Senate, and then, of course, after him running for Senate. Do we have any polling on how voters are perceiving the vice presidential nominee on the GOP side?
Not a lot on J.D. Vance. As you noted, he's relatively new on the scene. He's a couple years younger than I am, which is funny to say. But that's a good thing for someone like him, because he will get an opportunity to put his message out and define himself in front of the voters. Now, the Democrats are certainly going to spend a lot of money trying to define some of his positions, but he has marked a clearly populist viewpoint, everything from labor to taxes to immigration to foreign policy. And populism is just another word for he's trying to get the popular opinion out there, and that's what he's trying to represent, and that should be helpful. We'll see how it plays out, but the best stat for him is he doesn't have a lot of stats, so he gets to make his own way in the polling going forward.
Well, it's interesting because we're already seeing Democrats trying to define him. Sorry, it's a little late at night here, but Kamala Harris on Thursday was in North Carolina, already trying to take some jabs at J.D. Vance. Democrats tying him to Project 2025, that governing agenda that was released by the Heritage Foundation. They're calling him the poster child of that. Of course, the Trump campaign trying to distance themselves from that agenda. But interesting to see how quickly the other side is trying to define him. So looking at the Biden campaign, we are seeing, so much reporting, or just a plethora of reporting saying there could be announcement in the coming days regarding the president's Biden's political future. The campaign, the White House, very much saying that we shouldn't expect that. What do you expect will happen here, Scott?
Yeah, look, I'm just about as inside the beltway as you are, and when you see this many off the record leaks, on the record leaks, back and forward on what he's going to do, all you can conclude is this isn't a good thing for Joe Biden, whether or not he steps aside or he's the nominee in a few months. You couldn't plan this better. We just came off spending 5 minutes talking about unifying convention, powerful Donald Trump speech, and yet we're still questioning whether Joe Biden's going to accept the nomination here in a month. I don't know how it's going to play out. The numbers tell me that the Democrats would probably be better off with a fresh candidate at the top of the ticket. But it's Joe Biden's choice, and he has been very adamant, at least in his official statements from himself and through his campaign staff, that he's not going to step down. And then we have Democratic leaders like Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, major Democratic donors, very publicly, and some pretty forcefully in op-eds saying he should step aside. So they've got a lot to figure out. Normally this stuff plays out over the course of a year's worth of a primary, and this is going to play out probably over the next couple of weeks now.
Yeah, just before the Democratic National Convention, so that should be quite something to watch. So I want to go back to polling, Scott, and look at how Biden is doing. The president has argued that most recent polling he's seeing, at least, says he's essentially ahead of Trump. There's some polling he says there's some polling that says that he's trailing Trump within the margin of error. Do you think it's safe enough for the president to focus on that, or is the campaign essentially in free fall?
I can understand why he's focusing on it, but I just don't see the data to back it up. Look, the Hill DDHQ polling average is looking at about 30-plus polls taken post-debate and about half a dozen polls taken post-assassination attempt. And while, yes, you can cherry-pick a poll or two out of a state like Michigan or a state like Wisconsin, where Joe Biden is doing a point or two better than Donald Trump, across the board in the averages, which is a better way to look at some of these polling, Donald Trump has picked up a point or two in key states like Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan, Arizona, Nevada. Now, still close, but trend is his way. The trend is not the going the way that Joe Biden wants it to go, no matter what he says.
So there's a lot of conversation about if Biden were to drop out, who would fill, take his place at the top of the ticket. Kamala Harris seems to be the most likely option. She is his heir apparent as the vice president. She would automatically get those campaign funds, the staff, etc. But who do you think has the best chance in a head-to-head matchup against Trump if Biden drops out?
Look, if we were just to do this by the numbers, do this by the spreadsheets, if whoever wins Pennsylvania has about an 85% chance of winning the presidency. Whoever wins Pennsylvania and Michigan has about a 92% chance of winning the presidency. Look, Donald Trump and J.D. Vance, their ticket is set. The Democrats, not so much. So on paper, on spreadsheets, Josh Shapiro, Gretchen Whitmer, those are two strong, very popular governors in two of those key states I talked about. But as you pointed out, look, the way the rules work, the way the DNC works, it's set up. She has the clearest path to the nomination should Joe Biden swap himself out.
Scott Tranter, thank you so much for breaking it down with us and for staying up very late on this fourth and final night of the Republican National Convention. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
And stick around in just a we're back with more America's Vote 2024 live coverage. We're heading straight to the Republican National Convention with the Hill's congressional reporter Mychael Schnell, who has been on the ground in Milwaukee all week. Mychael, it's so good to see you. I know you were just on the convention floor for that very exciting bald balloon drop. Give us a sense of what the energy in that room was like right now.
Julia, it's jubilant. And the floor is right behind me. As soon as you can see, right behind me is the arena. We're in Fifth Serve Forum right now. Right behind me is the main stage. You're looking at it right there on your screen. That is where former President Trump tonight officially accepted the Republican nomination for president and delivered an hour-and-a-half speech. Now, this speech covered a lot of ground. The beginning really focused on Saturday's shooting at his rally. Former President Trump saying that he would tell the story about what happened on Saturday, but knowing that he would only do it once because it was so painful to talk about. He went through in harrowing detail the moment when he realized that a bullet had whizzed through his ear, had pierced his ear, and being covered by Secret Service agents. He showed that these photos, they are showing right now on the screen, those were shown on the big screen in the arena. After the conversation about Saturday's shooting, we then started to get into some of former President Trump's greatest hits, so to say. He spoke about former Speaker Nancy. He spoke about the situation at the southern border. He mentioned Hannibal Lecter from Silence of the Lambs, something that had become common and frequent of his rallies. Julia, I'll note, we were told earlier before the speech started that it would run for about 70 minutes, about an hour and 10 minutes. By my count, this speech ran for about an hour and 30 minutes, and that's because there were several times when former President Trump went off script and sort of started riffing. And that's when it sort of started to get into some of his rally talk. Now, by the end of this speech, I will note, in the beginning, I have been on this floor all week, every day, Julia, for the past 4 days. In the beginning of former President Trump's speech, when he was talking about Saturday's shooting, you could hear a pin drop. It was extremely silent. People were very cued in, listening very intently to the former president's words as, again, he told the harrowing story of Saturday's shooting. By the end of the night, I started to see some people on their phones, some folks sort of looking a little like they were ready to perhaps leave the arena. It's been a long day. It was a long 4 days. But nonetheless, really, the speech sort of seemed like it was split into two. A, the conversation about Trump's rally, and B, some of his greatest hits. But all throughout, he has been pushing this idea of unity. It's been something that we've heard from the former president and other speakers throughout this 4-day confab here in Milwaukee.
So on that note, Mychael, Republican messaging has changed a bit since the attempted assassination of Trump. Tonight, he made, obviously, a number of references to healing division within the country. Look, we know that, obviously, Republicans and Democrats called for unity after that shooting, but it seems like this theme of unity was something we saw throughout the week. It seems like Republicans are extremely united right now, no?
Yes, and this is something that they were really trying to push. Julia, you cover campaigns as closely as anybody. What was really significant, I thought, was the program on Tuesday night. That's when we heard from Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, former U.S. ambassador to the UN, Nikki Haley, Texas Senator Ted Cruz. What those three individuals have in common is all three of them were previously opposed to former President Donald Trump and then careened back into his corner. Specifically, when you talk about DeSantis and Nikki Haley, we'll remember from the primary, those two went against former President Trump very hard. You know, really, they did not hold back in terms of the attacks on one another. And then on Tuesday night, we saw these two individuals take the stage and speak in favor of former President Donald Trump, specifically Nikki Haley. She went on stage and she said, "We may have differences. You may not agree with me exactly, but former President Trump is better than President Biden." This is the message that we heard, and it's important because in some of those late stage primaries, Julia, we saw Nikki Haley bringing in about 20% of the vote. And this was already weeks after she had dropped out. It showed that there was still a contingent of the Republican Party who wasn't yet ready for their support behind Donald Trump. That's troubling for the former president because, as we've seen in all of these national polls and the battleground state surveys, this election is so close. So the theme of this week was that no voter should go unspoken to. The Republicans need all voters if they're going to beat President Biden. That was certainly the theme that we heard tonight as well.
Yeah, a lot of focus on, sort of the voters in the Rust Belt, the blue-collar working class this week. But obviously, the suburban vote that Nikki Haley has done so well to appeal to, that vote very important for Republicans and also obviously Democrats as well. Mychael Schnell, as always, thank you so much for bringing us the latest from Milwaukee.
Thanks, Julia.
And stick around. We've got so much more live coverage tonight. I'm Julia Manchester, and we're taking a short break, and we'll hand things over to Rising's Robby Soave when we come back.
Welcome back to our live coverage of the RNC. I'm Robby Soave, and I'm joined by Jessica Burbank, who co-hosts Rising with me. We obviously just watched that speech, very long speech by former President Donald Trump as he accepts formally the nomination to be the 2024 Republican candidate. My take was that it was a very effective speech early on, as he detailed what it was like to go through that assassination attempt, the bullet going right past his head. I'm nicking his ear and feeling the blood and that moment of concern. And he had a lot of very kind words about the crowd and about the victims. And this was the first time we got to hear from him on this front. And I think everyone was glued to their TV screens, or if you were down there at the convention, everyone was paying attention to what he had to say. He said that this was the only time he's ever going to talk about it because it was actually very horrifying and very painful. And it seemed it was an unusually, certainly somber and restrained moment from Donald Trump. And then he got into kind of his usual rally shtick. What did you think, Jessica?
Well, we've never seen anything like it. Many people are saying no one's ever seen anything like it. Nothing's ever been this special, Robby. We had the usual Trumpisms all the way throughout. I think a lot of people wondered if, the assassination attempts would be a spiritual moment and he would be some kind of changed man. This speech confirmed that he is not. He did not find God. After all of the calls for unity, Robby, I'm surprised that what we're getting from Trump are statements like, we've seen the murder rate drop in Caracas, Venezuela. Used to be a very dangerous place. We've seen it drop 70%. The figure changed a few times. I'm not sure what it really is. But he said that if the other guy wins, that the RNC is going to have to be in Caracas the next time. That's not exactly a unity type statement. That doesn't make me feel like we're all on the same team here. He spoke about people leaving Wisconsin to go to the nation's capital, which he called a killing field. And he said that you can come from Wisconsin and visit the National Monument, and people are getting shot and stabbed. that's also not exactly a message of unity and to quell violence. He's saying he's the only guy that can fix that. He's also talking about migrants taking Hispanic jobs and black jobs. It's just not giving the unity vibe that saying the word unity seems to provide in his mind. He thinks that just speaking the words into existence, it's happening, but the rest of his speech negated the first portion.
Well, I don't know about that. I mean, you're right that that's certainly been the reaction from, a lot of people I follow in media who, hate Trump anyway. So it's right that he did not refrain from saying anything about the state of the country or complaining about how Joe Biden has run it or, going to any of his previous kind of lines. No, you're right. He did that. He talked about illegal immigration. He talked about crime, including in the nation's capital, where crime has been. It's not as bad this year as it was last year, but there was a major wave of crime that's receded partly, but not entirely. And there are a lot of myself living here. There's a lot of concerns about, people are not getting shot and stabbed constantly, but there is a sense that the Democratic leadership of the city, there's just one city in America, has lost control of how to deal with crime here. So maybe it's not a unifying message, but ultimately it can't be all that unified. He's running against Joe Biden. He thinks Joe Biden has a failed record. He thinks the policies were very bad, and he set out to correct them. I think it was restrained in terms of its tone because it was just 4 or 5 days ago that he was almost assassinated, that he was injured, and it's not a serious injury, thank goodness, but he might, for all we know, he could be in a lot of pain. He could be taking painkillers. He seemed more sedated than he usually does, reflecting, I think, the somber thing he went through. So, yes, I saw a lot of criticism from the media that he did get political as expected for the second part of the speech. I don't know that really loses him anything or gains him anything. I don't ultimately think it's going to matter all that much. He could have kept the speech shorter, certainly, so that you and I could have gone to bed a little bit earlier. But other than that, I think it's still and the whole convention, frankly, a pretty big win for Republicans in terms of turning up their energy in anticipation of the weeks to come in the election.
Well, everybody loses when there's violence in America, right, Robby? I think when the murder rate has been down, according to the statistics at a national level, including in America's biggest cities, at a time when you're calling for unity and saying that existential threats, saying that the election is a choice that does threaten your life, that there are existential threats of either side, that rhetoric is what causes people to do things like the shooter did on Saturday. And so when I think about him making the threats of crime on the rise in Washington somehow affecting people there in Wisconsin because they're there visiting as tourists to Washington, D.C., and that they'll be killed there, and he's the only guy who can fix that, and violence will get so bad you'll have to go to Crocus. He's telling people there's an existential threat that the election depends on. That is exactly the type of rhetoric that they're saying caused the violence that we observed on Saturday. So it just didn't feel like a speech with unity in it at all for me.
Yeah, but I think the people saying that about how Democratic or media rhetoric. What's that?
I'm the people saying it. You can just talk to me.
You're the people. No. I was not talking about those people. I was saying those on the right who have blamed anti-Trump rhetoric for causing the violence. I've called that out repeatedly on our show because I don't think that's fair. I don't really think this. I think there's a very much more tenuous than the media likes to pretend connection between political rhetoric and political violence in this country or violence aimed at political figures. We still don't know very much about the shooter from over the weekend, although what we are learning is that he Googled Biden and I'm having a mental health crisis, and it so happened that Trump was speaking in a location that was closer to him than wherever Joe Biden was going to be speaking. Joe Biden's not doing as many speaking appearances, and as far as we know now, this could be just a deranged person without any sort of political agenda, especially one that's attached to violent rhetoric. So I'm shaming the violent rhetoric shamers right now, but that's.
And it's kind of rich that two of those guys are J.D. Vance and Don Jr., who are in the Trump camp, saying that the violent rhetoric of the Democrats is what caused this, by them saying democracy is in peril. I'd say it's worse to say your lives are at stake. That seems more extreme. But everyone seemingly at the convention, even just before Trump went out and spoke, was in lockstep with messaging around why he's running as well. That he doesn't need this, that he has enough money, that he's just doing this out of the goodness of his heart because he wants to serve the American people that have been left behind, kind of on the same beat as J.D. Vance. I think that's very interesting that we heard that same message no matter who was up at the microphone today. But let's not forget that Trump potentially faces prison time, and you can't arrest a sitting president, so he could be skirting going to prison by being in office. Robby, did you notice everyone saying that exact same thing?
Yeah, I mean, there's a sense that he has risked a whole lot to pursue the presidency again. I think that's certainly true. I think the arguments that they would not, I mean, obviously, if he had not tried to remain in office after losing the 2020 election, he would not be in all the criminal legal liability he suffered because of that. His pursuit of the presidency, you know, at all costs, has put himself in a perilous position that many of his supporters find admirable, that he's willing to, in their view, risk it all in order to return to the presidency and deliver them the policies that he has promised and the things that he's run on. You know, again, I have to point out, and I've pointed this out before, but the RNC this year is a major testament. And we didn't really have an RNC 4 years ago because it was COVID times. 8 years before that, going back to Trump's first election, he was not. He was opposed still. I mean, nominally, he'd won the nomination, but not everyone had fallen in line. Ted Cruz gave a speech at the convention where he did not endorse Donald Trump, where he told people to vote their conscience, and it was chaotic, and there was a sense that it was hopeless. That they were feeling the way Democrats are feeling this year. They were feeling like Donald Trump was certainly going to lose. They were going to lose the presidency, and they were going to refigure things out for how once Trump had lost, it was over, and they were going to plan for four years ahead. Today, Trump is in total control of the party. He is beloved by the party. All of the elites have fallen behind him. His own daughter-in-law was in charge of planning the convention. His whole family is there and is supporting him. There is no one that in good standing on the right who is against him. His vanquished rivals for the nomination this time, and some of them from last time, are all there endorsing him. That is a tremendous advantage that he has going to the election this time, that everyone on the right is on his side. So then it falls to the undecided voters, the swing voters. Did they tune into some of this coverage? Did they hear something they like? I don't know. I think he's still going to be making a case to them in the coming weeks, but also they're clearly going to be hearing maybe from Joe Biden. I mean, we're getting all these reports that he could be dropping out as soon as this weekend. I'm still a little skeptical of that, but I'm sounding increasingly Pollyannish because everyone else thinks he's a goner. Although I saw some of that reporting walk back as the closest people to Biden still said, "What are you talking about? No one's writing a dropping out speech for him. He's staying." So we'll have to see. Now that does conclude our post RNC coverage. Thank you all for watching. We appreciate it.
Bye, y'all.